Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Good afternoon. 1 year ago today, my predecessor, Minister Anand, presented a report to Parliament in which he agreed to implement all 48 of Madam Arbour's recommendations. And as we promised at that time, we will keep Canadians up to date on our progress to build meaningful cultural change in our country's military. And today, I'd like to provide you with an update on the progress that we have made before the year is through. By the end of the calendar year, we will expect to have implemented fully 19 of the recommendations from Madam Arbour's report. These recommendations are broad in scope, from how we address sexual offences in our military to supporting affected members, to empowering other external voices to conduct deeper reviews into our cultural change efforts, including at our Canadian military institutions. We are making real progress, but we must keep going. Today, I can announce that we are implementing the first two recommendations in Madam Arbour's report, which call for the removal of the term sexual misconduct from our official policies and the use of sexual assault as a standalone item. Madam Arbour found that this definition of sexual misconduct lacked coherence and clarity, and that we should be more effective in our efforts to eliminate these behaviours by more clearly defining them. Going forward, we are abolishing the term sexual misconduct, and we will ensure sexual assault as a standalone item in CAF policy with language in line with the Criminal Code of Canada, which defines sexual assault as intentional, non-consensual touching. The changes to the policy will be officially published in early 2024. We believe that by providing a clear definition of sexual assault in line with the Criminal Code, we will be better positioned to act when incidents occur and to respond in a more trauma-informed way. This definition will also shape our efforts going forward and improve clarity and certainty regarding prohibited conduct. As I noted earlier, these are just two of the 19 recommendations we have already implemented by the calendar year. We've also implemented Madam Arbour's 7th and 9th recommendations enabling CAF members to bring sexual harassment and discrimination complaints directly to the Canadian Human Rights Commission. We've moved forward on recommendations 12, 13, 15, and 16 by renaming and reforming the Sexual Misconduct Support and Resource Centre. For her 32nd recommendation, which provides me with assistance in providing approval of general officers and flag officers, and of course the appointment of an external monitor over a year ago. As I've said, we have much more work to do, and we plan on implementing legislation on recommendation 5 early in the next year. I'm also pleased today to make an announcement that I think is a very important one, that today I have had the privilege of appointing Michelle Douglas as the first honorary colonel for Chief Professional Conduct and Culture. Ms. Douglas is a remarkable Canadian. She's a Carleton University graduate, she's a veteran, she's a retired public servant, and she was a survivor of the LGBT purge, the Canadian government's systemic campaign of oppression against employees who were members of or suspected members of the LGBTQ2 communities from the 1950s till the early 1990s. Ms. Douglas served as an officer in the Canadian Armed Forces from 1986 to 1989, when she was discharged despite a distinguished service record simply because of her sexuality. And despite the shameful treatment, she went on to have an impressive career in the public service for 3 decades. She now serves as an executive director of the LGBT Church Fund, standing up for those who were affected. I am very grateful for Ms. Douglas for her courage, for agreeing to serve in this critically vital role, and for the example of courage and determination that she presents to all Canadians as well as members of the Canadian Armed Forces. As we approach the end of 2023, I also want to make clear that although we have made progress, there is much work left to be done, and by implementing Madam Arbour's recommendations, we are building a more inclusive work environment for those who keep us safe. We are building a military where all of the people can reach their full potential, where young, diverse Canadians can feel respected, protected, and empowered to serve. We will not ease up on these efforts. We will keep moving forward. Thank you, merci, and I'll be happy to take any of your questions.
Out of Madame Arbour's 48 recommendations, as of today, so not by the end of the year, as of today, how many recommendations have been fully completed?
19.
As of today?
Excuse me, the last two, as I mentioned, we are actually making the change in the regulation in the new year. That's as soon as it can be done. But the work is well completed, and it will take place on that day. And so those two recommendations will be completed in January. And as I've also indicated, Madam Justice, perhaps the most crucial recommendation. I've said 19 because we've done all the work and the regulation will be changed with respect to removing the sexual misconduct terminology from our things. That takes time to get that done, but the work is well underway. The decision has been made. It'll take place. It will be completed in very early in the new year. So I guess technically we can say that until that work is done, we're at 17. But I also want to comment, because you asked me an earlier question about recommendation 5 and when we hope to have that completed. It does require legislative change. As we've seen in this particular Parliament, getting that legislation introduced can be a challenge at times. I'm hoping that work will be able to proceed very early in the new year.
You had said that you were hopeful it was going to happen before the new year, so you're saying that's the reason why it didn't happen.
Well, I certainly aspired to have that legislation introduced before the end of this year. That has proven to be rather difficult. As you've seen, we've been kind of busy in the House, but it remains a priority. It remains our focus. I intend to bring forward that legislative change at the very first opportunity in the new year.
Is the legislation written?
What's that?
Is it on paper already, the legislation?
I'm really not in a position to comment on that. The work is underway, but it is my intention to be able to introduce that legislation early in the new year.
A Statistics Canada survey found that more than 30% of military members who were sexually assaulted say they believe the perpetrator, that alcohol was involved in their actions or contributed. People have got in touch with CBC that are military members and said, look, I have to pay for a mess, to be part of a mess, which is a private bar. It's mandatory. I have to pay a fee. I don't support a drinking culture in the military, and I don't think it's right. And I think that they think that the mess should end. Are you willing to do that?
Well, what I can tell you, certainly in my long history of dealing with offences of sexual assault, in society broadly, alcohol is very frequently a factor in those assaults, and it is concerning that the report and the experience of Canadian Forces members, as reported in the StatScan report, certainly revealed that concern, and that's an issue. I think it's absolutely incumbent upon us. I'm not sure we're going to be in a position to ban the use of alcohol in the Canadian Armed Forces, but certainly making sure that it is managed in a very responsible way, and I think we have to listen to our members who clearly indicated to us that is a concern, and we have to address that concern.
Should people be forced to join a private bar and pay a fee for that if they don't condone alcohol being promoted in the military at a time when there's a crisis like this?
And actually, I'm sorry, I'm not aware that they are compelled to actually join the mess. I'll follow up on that because I'm not aware that is a requirement, but if it is, certainly is something I'm willing to look at.
These investigative reports show that in many or some of the cases, there's alleged sexual assaults happening at the mess or at mess dinners. So why not, at this point, since you're tasked with changing the military's culture, say, look, this is extreme, but we need to strip the military of alcohol right now.
If I may be really clear, sexual assault, sexual misconduct, any discrimination or sexual harassment of any member of the armed forces is unacceptable under any circumstances and anywhere. That includes in the workplace. It may include at a social function or after work. It is never acceptable. And that's why the work that we're doing in implementing Madam Justice Arbour's recommendations is so important. And it's not a matter of picking those circumstances where this will not be tolerated. It can't be tolerated at any time, under any circumstances. And we have to make sure that in our military colleges, in our workplaces, at national headquarters, in deployments out in the field, in our messes, at mess dinners, at social functions, in any aspect of the Canadian Armed Forces culture, we have to remove those toxic elements. We have to create a safe environment for all of the members of our service, and that's why the implementation of those recommendations are so critically important.
You said that alcohol is a societal problem. Do you not think it's a problem in the military? After everything you know.
Yeah, we recruit from the human race, and so it can be a problem in the military. I think what has been very, very, very clear in our consultations with our own members and what we hear from them and we're listening to them is that we need to make change. Madam Justice Arbour's report and her 48 recommendations provided us, I think, with a very clear roadmap forward, but we're not limiting ourselves only to the implementation of those recommendations. We're looking at all the circumstances that can give rise to this grossly inappropriate conduct and how we eliminate it from the experience in the workplace and in the lives of the members serving in our forces.
Will you commit today to look at the use of alcohol in the military and potentially banning it?
I have made very clear commitments that we are working hard in every aspect of the Canadian Armed Forces to remove all of those toxic elements of sexual harassment, sexual assault, misconduct, and conduct directed towards women in the military, minorities in the military, people just generally in all aspects of service, to make sure that everyone can be assured of a safe, inclusive, and protective, respectful workplace. And that work is broader than just looking at any one element of it. It's why the work is so complex, but also so important.
The Immigration and Refugee Board says today that they're moving forward with the process to remove 2 Iranian officials who are part of the regime. As the former public safety minister, how do people like that even get into Canada in the first place?
Well, again, there are usually background checks about people coming into Canada, but at the same time, if information suddenly becomes available to our officials, either at CBSA or through the RCMP or others, if information becomes available that determines that the circumstances under which they entered their country was not fully informed by the facts, or if new information arises, that we're able to act on that. And I think it's entirely appropriate when it's determined that individuals who have come into this country under one pretense are determined to be ineligible to remain here, that they're subsequently removed.
There's a large Iranian community in Canada. What do you say to them about their concern that there are regime officials who've been able to make it here to Canada?
Yeah, I want to assure them that we remain absolutely committed. People who have no place in Canada will be removed. We need the cooperation of the community. We need information in order to deal effectively with these individuals. But we know that there are certain individuals, particularly from who have been involved in the IRGC or the state of Iran, who are involved in the sponsorship of terrorism in different parts of the world, and when individuals have been involved in activity that would make them ineligible to be in this country, we'll do everything we can to keep them out, and when they do get into this country, we'll do everything we can to remove them.
We've spoken to some wildland firefighters and emergency preparedness folks who are very concerned that our fleet is going to age out. I was wondering if this is a concern that the government has and what you're doing about it.
And again, which fleet are you referring to?
Our air tanker fleet.
Are you referring to the water bombers?
Probably.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear. First of all, the federal government doesn't actually own a fleet of water bombers. They're owned by the provinces, and we also assist the provinces through an organization called CIFC, the Canadian Interagency Firefighter Centre, in acquiring water bombers from other jurisdictions. That they're often rented and leased by other companies. We understand that there is a challenge. I know that, for example, Natural Resources Canada was provided with funding last year to assist in the acquisition for the provinces and territories in the acquisition of firefighting equipment and for Indigenous communities. And I know there's active discussions about where those and how many of that equipment, what equipment would be required. The water bomber fleet has proven itself, certainly in last year's fires, to be absolutely essential. And when the provinces told us that it exceeded their capacity, we worked with a number of international jurisdictions to bring in firefighters, bring equipment in, and bring in water bombers. We always have that resource available to us, but we want to make sure that Canada has what it needs.
So if there comes to be gaps in our capacity as these water bombers start to sort of age out of the system, how quickly can the federal government assist provinces in sort of restocking?
Well, again, about 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Kamloops. There's an emergency Wildfire BC and Emergency Management BC operate an airfield just outside of Kamloops where they have a number of the planes. I had an opportunity to see the planes they were using, to speak to the pilots and see the remarkable work that they are doing there. I think there is already a very robust capacity in this country, but sometimes circumstances like the fires we saw last summer can exceed that capacity. And when that happens, we have the ability to go to other jurisdictions or to private enterprise, lease the water bombers that we need, and deliver the services that are needed by Canadians.
Do we need a national fleet?
I'm sorry?
Do we need a national fleet?
Well, again, I think it's useful to understand that the responsibility for the first response to emergencies such as a wildfire is a provincial and territorial one. And when the circumstances, as it did on a number of occasions in Nova Scotia, Quebec, British Columbia, Alberta, and the Northwest Territories this past summer, when it exceeds the capacity of the provincial or territorial jurisdiction to respond to those fires, then they make requests for assistance of the federal government, and we do everything that's possible to provide them with that assistance.
Do you consider 17 out of 48 recommendations by Madame Arbour at this point a success?
I consider it real progress, ma'am. I know how hard General Carignan and her team and my team have been working through the implementation. I really look not to the number, but to the report of the external monitor, and I draw your attention to Madame Carrignan's external monitor report. She's now published 2 of them. We work really closely with her, and she not only sees the outcome of those which have been implemented, but all the work that's going into implementing the rest of the recommendations. That's why we have an external monitor, and that's why we make a report public. And so I'd invite you to take a look at that. And I think that'll give you a much better understanding of the work that has been accomplished and the work that is well underway. Thank you.